Right now, as you listen to this, a moving truck is pulling out of a driveway somewhere in California. A family is loading the last box, taking one final look at the Pacific, and driving east. Not because they want to, because they have no other choice. This is the story of how the most beautiful coastline in America became a golden cage, and why millions of people are fleeing the very place they once called paradise. The American dream always had a clear geography. When we reached the edge of the continent, when we set foot in California, Oregon, and Washington, we said, this is where the journey ends. This is where we build the future. After World War II, between 1955 and 1960, more than 5 million people moved to California searching for exactly that. They were not adventurers chasing gold. They were aerospace factory workers, teachers, mechanics, nurses. The American middle class found on the West Coast what the rest of the country was still trying to build. Stable jobs, temperate climate, room to grow. A 3-bedroom house in Orange County cost around $15,000 in 1955. With an average engineer salary, you could pay off that mortgage in 12 years. The system worked because it was designed to work. Now, look at the geography that made all of this possible. The West Coast sits between the Pacific Ocean and some of the most dramatic mountain ranges on Earth. The Cascades in the north, the Sierra Nevada running down California like a granite spine. This created a narrow corridor of livable, temperate land hugging the shore. Mild winters, warm summers, fertile valleys stretching inland just far enough to feed entire cities. Portland had rain but no hurricanes. San Diego had sun but no tornadoes. Seattle had gray skies but no blizzards that buried you for weeks. The land itself invited settlement. It whispered, "Come, stay, build." And for decades, that is exactly what people did. Portland was where dreamers opened bookstores and coffee shops without fearing immediate bankruptcy. Seattle was the place where Boeing offered employment and pensions for an entire generation. Los Angeles was not just Hollywood, it was the largest manufacturing hub in the West. San Francisco glowed with the promise of counterculture and technological experimentation. You could walk along the beach at sunset and return to a house that was truly yours. In 1970, the median home price in San Francisco was approximately $45,000. The average salary for a public sector worker hovered around $11,000 annually. The ratio was 4-to-1. You worked 4 years of your full salary, and the house was yours. That equation allowed complete generations to achieve the stability their parents never had. The West Coast was not for the rich. It was for the brave. For those who wanted to live close to the future. And then came the turning point. Between 1980 and 2000, something shifted in the cultural perception of the West. It was no longer just a viable option. It became the mandatory destination for anyone who wanted to matter. Silicon Valley transformed garages into empires. Hollywood stopped being a regional industry and became the dream factory of the entire planet. Seattle gave birth to Microsoft and then to Amazon. Living in these cities became a status symbol. You did not just earn well, you lived well. You could tell your family in Ohio that you had made it because your zip code started with 90 or 98. Demand began to exceed supply, but nobody thought that was a structural problem. We thought it was a sign of success. We celebrated rising property values like victories. Between 2000 and 2010, the San Francisco metro area added approximately 600,000 new jobs, but only built around 165,000 housing units. More people kept arriving, but the houses simply did not follow. The arithmetic never added up. Why did we not build more? Here begins the structural tragedy. In 1968, California passed zoning laws that severely restricted the construction of multifamily housing. Single-family zoning converted more than 75% of San Francisco residential land into zones exclusive to single-family homes. Seattle followed the same path. Portland, too. The logic was to preserve the character of neighborhoods, to protect the value of existing properties. What we really did was close the door behind us. We arrived first, bought cheap, and then decided nobody else could have the same opportunity. Environmental protection laws, designed with good intentions, became weapons against affordable housing. Every new project faced years of appeals, impact studies, and community meetings where current residents voted against any change. A house in Palo Alto that cost $200,000 in 1990 was worth $2 million by 2010. Who would want that to change? Artificial scarcity became guaranteed wealth for those who arrived first. But for those who came after, the West Coast stopped being a destination and became an economic exile. In 2020, the median home price in San Francisco reached $1,400,000. In Seattle, $800,000. In Los Angeles, $700,000. The median salary in those cities hovered around $80,000 annually. The ratio was no longer 4-to-1. It was 17-to-1. You needed 17 years of complete salary, without spending a single penny on food or clothing, just to buy an average house. That is not a market. That is a systematic expulsion disguised as free enterprise. Young professionals arriving with college degrees and job offers from tech companies discovered that their six-figure salaries barely covered rent for a one-bedroom apartment. A software engineer making $120,000 a year in San Francisco spent $3,000 monthly on rent alone. After taxes and basic expenses, almost nothing remained for savings. The idea of buying a house, starting a family, putting down roots, it vanished like the morning fog over the Golden Gate. A public school teacher in Oakland earned approximately $70,000 a year. He could not buy a house in the city where he taught. A nurse in Seattle made $85,000. She could not either. Essential workers, the people who kept the infrastructure of these cities running, were systematically expelled to distant suburbs. They began driving 2 hours daily to reach jobs that were supposedly the gateway to the middle class. The dream became a sentence to perpetual traffic. The cultural cost runs deeper than any spreadsheet can measure. Grandparents who raised their children in Pasadena now watch their grandchildren grow up in Arizona through video calls. Artists and musicians who once defined the soul of San Francisco found themselves priced out of the neighborhoods they helped create. The gallery owner who spent 30 years building a community in the Mission District closed her doors when the rent tripled in 5 years. The jazz club in Capitol Hill that launched careers for decades shut down when the building sold to developers. These were not just businesses. They were the beating hearts of cultural ecosystems. When they disappeared, something irreplaceable vanished with them. The restaurant workers, the baristas, the bookstore clerks who gave these cities their texture now commute from towns 50 miles away. They serve lattes at dawn to tech workers who earn 10 times their salary. They ring up groceries for families who live in neighborhoods they will never afford. The invisible architecture of resentment grows with every transaction, every reminder that the city no longer belongs to those who actually make it function. Migration data from the last 5 years tells the story plainly. Between 2018 and 2023, California lost approximately 1,200,000 net residents. They did not leave because they stopped loving the ocean or the climate. They left because balancing the budget each month became a mathematical nightmare. Interior cities began receiving waves of economic refugees from the West. Austin, Boise, Phoenix, Nashville. Places where a house still cost less than $500,000. Where a professional salary still meant stability. The cruel irony is that many of these migrants were natives of California, Oregon, and Washington. They had grown up watching the Pacific, knew every beach and every mountain trail. But their own cities had turned them into strangers. They could not compete with foreign capital buying properties in cash, with investment funds converting entire neighborhoods into rental portfolios, with speculation that treated houses as financial assets instead of homes. The system was never designed for this. The founders of these cities imagined communities where workers could live close to their jobs, where families could grow without the constant terror of housing insecurity. But we allowed the zoning laws of the 60s to fossilize. We never updated them to reflect an economy that had changed completely. We kept pretending that the solution was to preserve the past instead of building for the future. Today, a 50-year-old person who worked their entire life in Portland, who contributed to their community, who paid taxes and raised children, may find themselves living in a studio apartment because they could never gather the down payment for a house. Not because they failed, not because they made bad decisions, simply because the zip code they love sentenced them to relative poverty. The West Coast remains stunningly beautiful. The mountains of the Cascade Range are still snow-capped in winter. The redwoods still tower over the northern coast. The Golden Gate still shines under the afternoon sun. But beauty has become a museum, accessible only to those who can pay admission. The rest of us have become tourists in our own land. And so, the Great Migration continues. Moving trucks head east, loaded with the remains of a dream that was once achievable. Children who grew up playing on California beaches now buy houses in suburbs they never imagined living in. Not by choice, by necessity. So here is the question that keeps me up at night. Can we fix this? Can we rewrite the zoning codes, build enough housing, and bring the ratio back to something a working family can survive? Or have we permanently broken the promise of the West? Is the Pacific coastline destined to be a private resort for the wealthy while the rest of America watches from 1,000 miles away? If you or your children have had to say goodbye to the Pacific not for lack of love but for simple arithmetic, you are not alone. This is not just a housing crisis. It is the end of a promise that once defined what it meant to be American. The moment when the West stopped welcoming us and started saying goodbye.